Hi, I'm Oliver, and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Today I'm going to do 5 albums to get you into experimental hip-hop. Experimental hip-hop is a subgenre of hip-hop which draws from loads of different stylistic and musical influences. It often uses unusual and eclectic sampling, live instruments, obscure lyricism. Also, a lot of experimental hip-hop isn't quantized. For those of you that don't know, quantization is a process where a producer can digitally change a musical track, so whether that's a drum beat or a bass rhythm or anything basically, and digitally put it back on the beat, so everything is to the fraction exactly where the metronome marker on Logic or whatever music track they're using is. Which gives a result. It's very mechanized sound, which is obviously something that's quite big in hip hop. Some of the beat makers, they'll use very quantized sounds. Some experimental hip hop artists have shied away from that and they've gone, okay, no, we want this to sound a little bit more organic, so not using quantization. It's a bit of the battle of the genre names again. It's difficult, experimental hip hop, because it's a very fluid genre. It's an exciting genre to be following. All the time, hip hop's been progressing through the decades. The artists involved have been getting more and more experimental with the sampling they're doing, the features they're including, the types of influences that they're allowing them to influence in their work. Because of these fringe artists on the experimental edge are pushing the boundaries all the time, it wills these artists that are in the mainstream to use some of those techniques, and therefore these fringe artists are always pushing the medium forward. So who knows what experimental hip-hop is going to sound like in 20 years' time? It's probably completely unrecognizable to what it sounds like right now. So with that in mind, the albums that I've picked today are definitely experimental in the sense that when they were released they were considered experimental. Maybe they're not as considered as experimental now, but that's what happens with an ever-changing, ever-evolving genre. So number 1, Dr. Octagon with Dr. Octagonecologyst, released in 1996. So Dr. Octagon is a character that was created by the legendary rapper Kool Keith, who's considered one of the fathers of experimental challenging hip-hop. His lyricism is often very abstract and bizarre, and a lot of it's thematically very sexual. Which is something that Keith himself has called pornocore. So Dr. Octagonecologyst is actually Kool Keith's debut album with a narrative. So the narrative is, it's about a time-traveling alien gynecologist from Jupiter. Seriously. So Dr. Octagon basically spends a lot of his time killing his patients due to carelessness and having sex with his co-workers and having sex with the patients he hasn't killed as well. This record is definitely considered a cornerstone of experimental hip-hop, with obscure, satirical, bizarre lyrics, trippy hip-hop beats, but with sci-fi and orchestral sampling as well. Hip-hop has a really colourful history of challenging its audience and society at the time with abrasive lyrics and dark themes. One of the skits on the album, called A Visit to the Gynecologist, has Dr. Octagon pretending to be a female gynecologist and inserting fingers into his patient. A bit rapey. It's a strange thing to listen to because it's horrifying, but at the same time it's kind of funny as well. And Kool Keith is challenging audiences by creating this thing that you don't know whether to laugh at or be horrified by. Despite all the experimentalism, the strange sci-fi based narrative, it's still a really brilliant hip-hop album on the surface. The beats are fantastic. Kool Keith has a very idiosyncratic flow, which I can't really describe, you just need to go and listen to it. It's very different, you can tell it when it's him that's rapping. Basically just a really exciting and genre-breaking album. Number 2, Cannibal Ox with Cold Vein, released in 2001. Cannibal Ox are a duo hailing from Harlem in New York, combining the two rappers Vast Air and Vordul Mega. This is actually also a debut from these guys as well. At the time of release, they signed to LP's brand new label, Definitive Jux. At this point, LP hadn't released anything on the label yet, and LP had actually come on to do production duties for this. It's funny, despite finding huge success with Run the Jewels, the production that he did on Killer Mike's RAP music, this is still considered his creative peak by many people, especially from a producer angle. The opening track, Iron Galaxy, sets the tone for this unique and interesting journey that's going to take us through the streets of New York and up into space and beyond. It feels really raw lyrically, with specific lines like, I'm just going to look at the line, I rest my head on 115, but miracles only happen on 34th, so I guess life is mean, and death is the median, and purgatory is the mode that we settle in. That sounds so shit in a British accent. But then there are bizarre lyrics like, my mother said I sucked her pussy when I came out, which is so juvenile. And I don't know whether this was deliberate or not from these guys, but combining the existential with the juvenile really works, because it feels like you're on this journey with these two people who are struggling with the bridge from adolescence to adulthood. So they still say stupid things and talk about, you know, their mum's pussy, but they're also battling with these existential themes and where their place is in the universe. Coupled with the abrasive drum beats and the sci-fi leaning production, it feels like a gritty impression is left on you, and it feels like it embodies Vast Air and Virgil Mega's time growing up in New York really well, because you have the street tales, but then it also lifts it as well. That sci-fi angle lifts the album, so it feels like it's not just about their experiences, but it's about their hopes and dreams of getting out of that place and experiencing something beyond that. And it kind of embodies their hopes and dreams, and that's a really exciting thing to be able to have created sonically. A personal favourite of mine is Raspberry Fields, which kind of sounds like an Aphex Twin cut or something, with its skittering kick drum and dissonant synth sounds, before the beat slams in with this bassy reoccurring synth and Vast Air rapping, if you don't first succeed, try again, step up to the mic and die again. That's the best rapping I'll probably ever do. Number 3, Dilla with Donuts, released in 2006. James DeWitt Yancey was a very influential producer who worked with artists such as De La Soul, The Roots, A Tribe Called Quest, countless others. Sadly, he died from an aggressive blood disease only, I think, 3 days after this release came out, and he was working on tracks and completing tracks whilst he was in hospital, completely committed to his art. So this is different from the other picks in this top 5 because it is an instrumental hip-hop record, so the focus is on the beats, the sampling, and the production style. The depth and level of the samples that he uses on this need their own book, let alone their own video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Just know that the level of production he creates on this record it's just astonishing. He constructs this arc of tight beats and gorgeous soul, raiding some of the classics of the Jackson 5, Kool and the Gang, Beastie Boys. On the track Stop, Dilla uses a sample from Diane Warwick's You're Gonna Need Me, and a really beautiful production flourish, really great example of it. As Diana sings Stop, the whole track jumps out for just half a beat and then comes back on the on-beat again. It's just a beautiful little flourish that just shows his love and his craft at work. There's just a real respect for the samples. You can tell he was a true music lover, and yes, he manipulated them with his production, but there was always a respect sitting back there for what he was producing. It's like he updated the samples and created this slab of neo-soul using all of his hip-hop techniques and intuition, this huge toolbox that he'd acquired from working with all of these influential acts of the past decades of working. A lot of the experimentalism comes from the cut and paste nature of the album. I mean, tracks will be 50 seconds long and have this beautiful earwormy passage that will get stuck in your head for days, and then it will jump onto the next thing, and days later you'll be thinking about that little segment from one track, just one passage, and you'll just need to go back to it again. J Dilla has inspired a generation of artists with this release, and he'll continue to inspire them as the decades go on. Just a fantastic record. Number 4, Madvillain with Madvillainy, released in 2004. Madvillain is the recording project of rapper MF Doom and musician, rapper, producer, instrumentalist Madlib. Madlib has worked on some incredible projects. I mean, his own debut album, Quasimoto, The Unseen. It was nearly on this list. It was so close. I had just edged it out very slightly, but another fantastic experimental hip-hop record. He also released another record I absolutely love called Shades of Blue, where he just raided the Blue Note jazz archives and created this beautiful tapestry of jazz and soul sounds. I'm digressing anyway. Go and listen to that if you have the chance. MF Doom is the product of Daniel DeMille, a rapper, and it's a supervillain persona. He's created a lot of projects using this persona. He wears a metal mask. It's on the album cover, actually. That's MF Doom's mask. He's done projects with Danger Mouse, like Danger Doom. He's done Doom Starks, Neruvian Doom, JJ Doom. He's a real collaborator. This is definitely an abstract but immediate hip-hop record. The beats and the rhymes flow consistently to create a really exciting piece of work. The production drifts and flows. It's not unlike J Dilla's Donuts, to be honest. You catch onto an idea, but just when you've just about understood the idea, it disappears again and you're ready to catch onto something else. It makes it quite an exhausting listen. And it takes a while to lock into this album, I would say, but once you have, you'll be there for a long time. You will not stop listening to it. There's a lack of hooks that you would find in mainstream rap and hip hop, with Madlib constructing his esoteric beats and production, and MF Doom rapping over the top in his kind of airy flow. Tracks like All Caps are just sublime slices of sonic gold. It has this infectious, cascading piano loop with a trumpet line mirroring it. And MF Doom's flow sits just behind the beat. Or there's that mysterious opener that samples Sun Ra and layers over the top these anachronistic news reports about the supervillain Madvillain. And it's just a strange and interesting world that these two guys have crafted. Or the second track, Accordion, which has this accordion sample, which you just want it to go on for 3 or 4 minutes, but it doesn't. It goes, no, cutting that, going on to the next place, and that's what's exciting. There's all these nuggets everywhere for you to delve into and get excited about. See, I could go on about this album forever, but I'm not going to. I'm going to shut up and move on to the next one. Go and listen to that now. And number 5, Shabazz Palaces with Black Up, released in 2011. Shabazz Palaces is another hip-hop duo comprising of Ishmael Butler, who is the former band leader of jazz hop trio Diggable Planets. Go and check out Reaching a Refutation of Time and Space, amazing. And also Tende Morer, I think I've said that right, who's this very talented multi-instrumentalist producer. This album is an immersive and writhing listen, drawing inspiration from jazz, world music, and contemporary electronic production. Despite on paper sounding like a potentially abrasive concoction, Shabazz Palaces have created something and built something with melody in mind, or as a focus, or as a destination. Tracks like Eulogy kick off with this buzzing, deep synth sound and tight snare beats, with the rhymes dipped in reverb, before a keyboard part comes along, flows along with the track, and then suddenly gives it this meditative quality. Or on the track Are You, Can You, Were You, which begins with down-tempo bass and synths, before the piano lines and offbeat drums kick in with Ishmael's rhymes. The synth acts as like this high-pitched drone throughout the track, but it's kind of ethereal and washy and melodic. The production on the King's Clothes Were Made by His Own Hands is very emotive in its simplicity. These snare rim clicks sitting alongside what sounds like a kind of a treated cello part, and then these mid-range synthy bloops. I feel like those moments are teased out by these abrasive and scratchier cuts, like the opening Free Press and Curl, which is all kind of trebly, almost ear-splitting hi-hat sounds and these deep wobbling bass lines. And that's what makes this album so exciting to me. It's got a coarseness and a challenging nature, but it doesn't forget the melody, and the melodic focus is always there. So that's my top 5 albums to get you into experimental hip-hop. It was an absolute bastard to try and work out the 5 albums I was going to pick. There was so many that I wanted to that I couldn't. Projects from Madlib, so Quasimoto's The Unseen, projects from Blackie, Clipping, Cloud Dead, Saul Williams, Nacho Picasso, the list goes on forever, you know, Death Grips, some of the Flying Lotus stuff, especially the recent stuff, very jazz focused. There's just so much. So I have done a Spotify playlist for the 5 albums that I've picked today, and I've done a huge Spotify playlist for more albums to get you into experimental hip hop, because the list just goes on. As always, please comment down below, tell me my opinion's shit, subscribe if you like the content. There's a lot of content on the way soon, so if there's anything specific you'd like to see in the future, let me know. Thanks a lot, see you later.